In 1963, President John F. Kennedy signed into law the Equal Pay Act, seeking to eliminate long-standing wage disparities based uniquely on sex. In passing this act, the U.S. Congress recognized wage discrimination as a public problem that unduly lowered wages and living standards, made labor markets less efficient, negatively affected commerce, and resulted in unfair and unwanted forms of competition. More than 5 decades later, wage disparities between sexes persist. Today, women in the United States earn 81 to 82% of what men in similar jobs earn. This gap, like other inequalities in the economy, is based not on unequal distributions of skills and capacities, but on how biases, incorrect assumptions, and explicit discrimination shape economic institutions. One important assumption that underlies different economic outcomes between men and women is that these two groups are fundamentally different in their biological constitution and, by consequence, in their psychological reactions. Writing more than 100 years ago, for example, Charles Darwin argued that women seem to differ from men in mental disposition, chiefly in their greater tenderness and less selfishness. Man delights in competition, and this leads to ambition which passes too easily into selfishness. Women, argues this incorrect assumption, lack a competitive drive, explaining why they choose certain jobs over others and family over employment. More recently, scholars have made similar arguments. In a 1998 article in the Economic Journal, based on a double-blind dictator game, Eckel and Grossman argue that women are twice as likely to be altruistic and pro-social as men. And in an even more recent study of 44 London traders, neurobiologists found that hormones associated to male traits, in particular testosterone, were associated to risk-taking and performance in financial markets. At the core, these studies assume a natural difference between sexes that is manifested in how they make personal, familiar, and career decisions. Indeed, much of the literature on the pay gap explains this as a result of explicit choices made by people of different sexes. According to this literature, women choose more flexible and consequently worse-paying positions in order to care for their families or households. What these studies ignore, however, is the fact that choices are shaped by institutional contexts. What we choose depends on what resources are afforded to us and what potential penalties we may face from taking choices or decisions seen as deviant from the norm. Choices are not made freely, but rather are mediated by cultures, relations, and institutions. This explains in part why the gender pay gap varies so widely across national and institutional contexts. It is not an unavoidable result of natural dispositions, but rather the direct result of how we actively build our societies.